Today I am continuing to read from The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, John Dominic Bobby. Through a glass, darkly. Hunched in my wheelchair, I surreptitiously watch my children as their mother pushes me down the hospital corridor. While I have become something of a zombie father, Theophile and Celeste are very much flesh and blood, energetic and noisy. I will never tire of seeing them walk alongside me, just walking, their confident expressions masking the unease weighing on their small shoulders. As he walks, Theophile dabs with a Kleenex as a thread of saliva escaping my closed lips. His movements are tentative, at once tender and fearful, as if he were dealing with an unpredictable animal. As soon as we slow down, Celeste cradles my head in her bare arms, covers my forehead with noisy kisses and says over and over, "You're my dad, you're my dad," as if in incantation. Today is Father's Day. Until my stroke, we had felt no need to fit this made-up holiday into our emotional calendar. But this time we spend the whole of this symbolic day together, affirming that even a rough sketch, a shadow, a tiny fragment of a dad is still a dad. I am torn between joy at seeing them living, moving, laughing, or crying for a few hours, and fear that the sight of all these sufferings, beginning with mine, is not the ideal entertainment for a boy of 10 and his 8-year-old sister. However, we have made the wise collective decision not to sugarcoat anything. We install ourselves at the beach club, my name for a patch of sand dune open to sun and wind, where the hospital has obligingly set out tables, chairs, and umbrellas, and even planted a few buttercups which grow in the sand amid the weeds. In the neutral zone on the beach, a transition between hospital and everyday life, one could easily imagine some good fairy turning every wheelchair into a chariot. "Want to play hangman?" asks Theophile, and I ache to tell him that I have enough on my plate playing quadriplegic. But my communication system disqualifies repartee. The keenest rapier grows dull and falls flat when it takes several minutes to thrust in home. By the time you strike, even you no longer understand what had seemed so witty before you started to dictate it, letter by letter, so the rule is to avoid impulsive sallies. It deprives conversation of its sparkle, all those gems you bat back and forth like a ball, and I count this forced lack of humor one of the great drawbacks of my condition. But we can certainly play hangman, the national preteen sport. I guess a letter, then another, then stumble on the third. My heart is not in the game. Grief surges over me, his face not 2 feet away from mine. My son Theophile sits patiently waiting, and I, his father, have lost the simple right to ruffle his bristly hair, clasp his downy neck, hug his small, lithe, warm body tight against me. There are no words to express it. My condition is monstrous, iniquitous, revolting, horrible. Suddenly I can take no more. Tears well, and my throat emits a hoarse rattle that startles Theophile. "Don't be scared, little man. I love you." Still engrossed in the game, he moves in for the kill. 2 more letters, he has won and I have lost. On a corner of the page he completes his drawing of the gallows, the rope, and the condemned man. Meanwhile, Celeste is doing cartwheels on the sand. Perhaps some compensatory mechanism is at work. Forever since the act of blinking became the equivalent of weightlifting for me, she has turned into a genuine acrobat. With the flexibility of a cat, she does a backflip, a handstand, a somersault, and a whole series of daring leaps and twists. She has recently added tightrope walker to the long list of professions she envisages for the future. After schoolteacher, supermodel, and florist, with the onlookers at the beach club won over by her display, our budding entertainer now launches into a song and dance act. To the great dismay of Theophile, who more than anything hates drawing attention to himself, as shy and reclusive as his sister is outgoing, he wholeheartedly hated me the day I sought and obtained permission to ring the school bell for the first day of class. No one can predict whether Theophile will be happy, but it is certain that he will live in the shadows. I wonder how Celeste has managed to accumulate such a repertoire of 60s songs. Johnny Hallyday, Sylvie Vartan, Sheila, Clo-Clo, Francois Hardy, all the stars of that golden era, alongside universally familiar numbers. Celeste sings forgotten hits that trail clouds of nostalgia in their wake. Not since I was 12, when I endlessly played it on my record player, have I heard the Clo-Clo Francois 45 RPM Poor Little Rich Girl, yet as soon as Celeste begins, somewhat off-key, every note, every verse, every detail of backup and orchestration comes back to me with startling precision, right down to the sound of the sea that filters through the opening bars. Once again I see the album cover, the singer's photo, his striped button-down shirt. I longed for a shirt like this, but for me it was unattainable. My mother considered it tacky. I even relieved the Sunday afternoon when I bought the record. My father's cousin kept a tiny record shop in the lower level of the Gare du Nord. He was a good-natured giant with a yellow Gitane cigarette dangling eternally from the corner of his mouth. Poor little rich girl, alone on the beach, alone and so rich. Time marches on and people have since disappeared. Mama died first, next Clo-Clo electrocuted himself. Then my father's gentle cousin, whose businesses had gone downhill, gave up the ghost, leaving an inconsolable tribe of children and animals behind. My wardrobe is now full of button-down shirts, and I believe the small record shop now sells chocolates. Since the Burke train leaves from the Gare du Nord, perhaps one day I shall ask someone to check on their way through. Well done, Celeste, cries Sylvie. Mama, I am bored. Theophile at once complains. It is 5 p.m. The chimes of the hospital clock, which usually strike me as a cheerful, assume funeral tones as the time for farewells draws near. Wind begins to whip up the sand. The tide has gone out so far that swimmers are nothing but tiny dots on the horizon. The children run to stretch their legs on the beach once more before leaving, and Sylvie and I remain alone as silent. Her hand squeezing my inert fingers behind dark glasses that reflect a flawless sky, she softly weeps over our shattered lives. We return to my room for the final leave-taking. How do you feel, buddy? Asks Theophile. His buddy's throat is tight, his hands are sunburned, and his coccyx hurts from sitting on it too long. But he has had a wonderful day. And what about you kids? What will you carry back from this field trip into my endless solitude? They have left. The car will already be speeding towards Paris. I sink into contemplation of a drawing brought by Celeste, which we immediately pinned to the wall, a kind of two-headed fish with blue-lashed eyes and multicolored scales. It has the shape of the mathematical symbol for infinity. Sun streams in through the window. It is the hour when the rays fall straight upon my pillow. In the commotion of departure, I forgot to signal for the curtains to be drawn. A nurse will be in before the world comes to an end. Paris. I am fading away, slowly but surely. Like the sailor who watches his home shore gradually disappear, I watch my past recede. My old life still burns within me, but more and more of it is reduced to the ashes of memory. Since taking up residence in my cocoon, I have made 2 brief trips to the world of Paris medicine to hear the verdict pronounced on me from the diagnostic heights. On the first occasion, my emotions got the better of me when my ambulance happened to pass the ultra-modern high-rise where I once followed the reprehensible calling of editor-in-chief of a famous woman's magazine. First, I recognized the building next door, a 60s antiquity, now scheduled to be demolished, according to the billboard out front. Then I saw our all-glass facade, eerily reflecting clouds and plains. On the pavement were a few of those familiar-looking faces that one passes every day for 10 years without ever being able to put a name to them. When I thought I glimpsed someone I actually knew, walking behind a woman with her hair up in bun, and a burly man in work clothes, I nearly unscrewed my head to see. Fate decreed otherwise. Perhaps someone had caught sight of my ambulance from our fifth floor offices. I shed a few tears as we passed the corner cafe where I used to drop in for a bite. I can weep discreetly. People think my eye is watering. The second time I went to Paris, 4 months later, I was unmoved by it. The streets were docked out in summer finery, but for me it was still winter, and what I saw through the ambulance windows was just a movie background. Filmmakers call the process a rare screen projection, with the hero's car speeding along a road which unrolls behind him on a studio wall. Hitchcock films owe much of their poetry to the use of this process in its early, unperfected stages. My own crossing of Paris left me indifferent, yet nothing was missing. Housewives in flowery dresses and youths on rollerblades, raving buses, messengers cursing on their scooters, the Place de l'Opéra, straight out of a Dufy campus, the treetops foaming like a surf against glass building fronts. Wisps of cloud in the sky, nothing was missing except me. I was elsewhere. The Turnip. On 8th June, it will be 6 months since my new life began. Your letters are piling up on the dresser, your drawings on my wall, and since I cannot hope to answer each one of you, I have decided to issue these Samizdat bulletins to report on my life. My progress and my hopes. At first, I refused to believe that anything serious had happened. In my semi-conscious state following the coma, I thought I would shortly be back in my Paris stamping grounds, with just a couple of canes to help me along. Those were the first words of the first mailing of my monthly letter from Burke, which I decided in late spring to send to my friends and associates. Addressed to some 60 people, that first bulletin created a mild stir and repaired some of the damage caused by rumor. The city, that monster with 100 mouths and 1,000 ears, which knows nothing but says everything, had written me off. At the Café de Flore, one of those base camps of Parisian snobbery which send up rumors like flights of carrier pigeons, some close friends of mine overheard a conversation at the next table. The gossipers were as greedy as vultures who have just discovered a disemboweled antelope. "Did you know that Bobby is now a total vegetable?" said one. "Yes, I heard. A complete vegetable," came the reply. The word vegetable must have tasted sweet on the know-it-all's tongue, for it came up several times between mouthfuls of Welsh rarebit. The tone of voice left no doubt that henceforth I belonged on a vegetable stall and not to the human race. France was at peace. One couldn't shoot the bearers of bad news. Instead, I would have to rely on myself if I wanted to prove that my IQ was still higher than a turnip's. Thus was born a collective correspondence which keeps me in touch with those I love, and my hubris has had gratifying results. Apart from an irrecoverable few who maintain a stubborn silence, everybody now understands that he can join me in my cocoon, even if sometimes the cocoon takes me into unexplored territory. I receive remarkable letters. They are opened for me, unfolded and spread out before my eyes, in a daily ritual that gives me the arrival of the post the character of a hushed and holy ceremony. I carefully read each letter myself. Some of them are serious in tone, discussing the meaning of life, invoking the supremacy of the soul, the mystery of every existence. And by a curious reversal, the people who focus most closely on these fundamental questions tend to be people I had known only superficially. Their small talk had masked hidden depths. Had I been blind and deaf, or does it take the glare of disaster to show a person's true nature? Other letters simply relate the small events that punctuate the passage of time: roses picked at dusk, the laziness of a rainy Sunday, a child crying himself to sleep, capturing the moment. These small slices of life, these small gusts of happiness, move me more deeply than all the rest. A couple of lines or 8 pages, a Middle Eastern stamp or a suburban postmark, I hoard all these letters like treasure. One day I hope to fasten them end to end in a half-mile streamer, to float in the wind like a banner raised to the glory of friendship. It will keep the vultures at bay.